All right, I'm going to be walking you through the build of the pitch deck for my biggest and most ambitious real estate project, hotel development project, of the 5 that I'm either working on or have opened in the last few years. I'm going to be explaining my process for how I go about building these out and how I think about things at each step in the process, as well as what information I'm including, and most importantly, in what sequence I am including that information. This is a unique deal, and it's a unique phase of the capital raising process that may not be exactly where you're at or what you're working on, but I actually think it's probably the best lens to look about this and consider your investor materials and your process. Because it's so unique, I've had to think about not just the what, but the why. Why am I doing what I'm doing, including what I'm including, and putting it in the order that I'm putting it in. So to give you context first, Oxido Sedona is a collection of vacation rentals, branded vacation rentals in Sedona, Arizona. This is my first deal that I ever started working on 4 years ago. We've gone through many iterations of this concept, partnerships, financing structures, etc., to get to where we're at now, where we have all the equity committed, but we are looking for a co-guarantor to help strengthen our general partnership's guarantee of the construction loan to get that financing secured. So that's what I mean by it's a unique phase or type of capital raise, where the people that we're approaching for this guarantee and what we're pitching them, it's different than just a standard equity investment. And you'll see that come through in the what and the why of what I'm doing. To start with my process, I'm building this in Figma rather than PowerPoint and rather than my software deal page, which I created to create these digital investment memos. The reason for that is, number one, the memos are great for acquisitions, sort of straightforward deals. Not only is this at a unique phase in the capital raise process, like I said, the guarantee and a different type of investor, it's just a unique and highly creative deal, and I wanted that level of customization. And the reason for Figma versus PowerPoint is I really like to get a high-level overview, just like this. The visual, the ability to do this is so important, and I'll tell you why. The way I approach building these decks out is I always start by pulling in 2 columns. On the left, I have reference slides that I screenshot from decks that I have or I've been passed in the past. And then I have my working slides on the right. Before I even get into putting any content or any design together, I'm just laying out the slides in the order that I think I'm going to go. And for every visual reference, I have an idea of what content is going to go there. So like this was one of the first reference slides I pulled in. I knew I wanted to do this very simple, very straightforward note at the beginning, just to say, hey, this is what this is where it is, this is what we're asking for. Again, with the guarantor investors I've been approaching over the last 4 months or so, I've found that they're typically more senior. They have to have some level of assets to have the strength to be a guarantor on a project like this. And with that, they're not as concerned about bells and whistles, about a bunch of fancy design. They really just want to know, what is this? What am I guaranteeing? What am I backing up? What am I getting in return? And sort of the layout of the property, just a different set of wants and needs when taking that information in. And so a big theme with this deck has been, number one, simplifying, being very, very straightforward, and then including a lot of visuals. So you'll see that as I go through. But the process is laying out the reference slides and really through several iterations, moving the sequence of those slides around. So like I said, I know what content this sort of lines up with, and I can say, okay, do I want this note to come at the beginning? Do I want it to come after the table of contents, etc.? And that goes throughout the entire deck. The process of moving that sequence around, and again, why I like Figma, I can sort of always at any point bump things up or bump them down. That extends all the way through the editing process, even to this morning when I was sort of wrapping up this final draft. But there's at least a few rounds in the beginning of just sequence. And then once I think I have a good sequence down, I start by just getting the very rough and raw content into the working slide column. Once I get that working slide column probably past the point where I have all the rough content in there, I'll sort of move these reference slides over to rough. This is sort of the page where I just dump everything as I go. And then I have my slides in the general order that I think they're going to be in. And then I just focus on the written content and the information for another couple of iterations before I get to actually designing things out. So I'll walk you through now the information and the sequence that I've landed on. So like I said, obviously a title slide. I have this just very straightforward note. And what I'll point out with this note is that I do two things. I just say what this is, where it is, what we're asking for, but I make sure in doing so to focus on what are the two key points, the strengths of this deal, which is number one, my partner Lauren, her background and track record with a concept that directly mirrors our project that has achieved a ton of critical and financial success. That's strength in point number one. And then strength number two is the land. This location is incredible. The views are incredible. It's what's kept this project together for 4 years. So I get that out of the way, and I'm able to impart on them right in the beginning the two biggest strengths of this deal. Then we have, I call it a vibe set slide, especially with these creative projects, is trying to set the mood and give them a sense for the visual. And then this deck ended up being longer than I thought it would be. I don't typically like doing table of contents in sections if I don't have to. It just bumps that slide number up. Again, you want to keep things simple, but this got to a level at 41 slides where I thought it was important. I'd say any slide count over 20, the table of contents is good because people they need to be able to digest what you're putting forward. And if they know kind of what to expect and in what order, it just makes it easier. This introduction is non-standard like the rest of this deck. Again, I'm basing this off of the pitches I've made over the last 4 or 5 months and the questions I've received. This first slide is pretty standard, an executive summary or investment overview, a short paragraph and the key sort of stats of the deal, costs, what we're offering, what they get in return. What's different about this intro is I go pretty deep. It's basically a location or property section, which is usually its own section. But because that's where we've gotten the most questions, because this is a unique concept, it's multiple vacation rentals sort of grouped together in a collection. People have just been like, what is this? How is this laid out? It's not just a hotel. It's not a single vacation rental. I wanted to show that here with the property overview. And then again, because the location and the land is such a strength, I spent 3 more slides in the introduction really hammering that home, showing like, hey, there's barely any developable land left. We have one of the last pieces of developable land. Our piece of land is the first piece of property available as you're coming out of Sedona into the canyon. It has great access to all the key things you'd want to access when in Sedona. And then critically, it's the only property above the tree line in the canyon, so you get these unobstructed red rock views. So that sets a lot of the most important information out, the basics of the investment, and again, hammering home this location, this property is key to this deal. One thing I'll say on process now is as I'm getting the content in there and starting to design it out, one of the other reasons why I like Figma is I don't just keep going. Typically, once I make some edits and changes to 1 or 2 slides or to a section, before I keep going forward, I am always going back up to the beginning and moving back through again down to where I left off and then going forward. I studied writing in college, creative writing. I wrote a lot of stories, and I like to think about the narrative rhythm and flow of the deck and going back to the beginning and reading through and doing that again and again and again. You focus on, okay, what is the reader reading? What are they feeling? The emotions that they're feeling. Are they getting excited? Are you exciting them about the land? What comes next? This really ties into my standard deck framework. I'm not exactly following this here, but the sense of this macro to micro sort of maxim, which really is about going to the most broad context of a deal and then moving down to the most specific. And then the idea of narrative urgency, always trying to think through not just what you're saying, but the order in which you're saying. Are you creating momentum? Are you creating belief? Are you creating excitement? An example of that is just within this concept section alone, which I move to next after the introduction. What I really like to do, rather than just saying, hey, this is what we're building, and then maybe saying, here's the data to back it up, is I'm always backing up first to what's the broader macro to micro story behind what we're doing, especially if it can be chronological, like the development of the market, of the city, of the town, or of the industry, like I'll show you here. How has that happened over time? And how has that created the opportunity that you're now exploiting or attacking or trying to target? That's this macro to micro idea where you, for a couple of reasons, you're establishing credibility by showing your deep knowledge, and you're taking the focus and pressure off your specific deal by putting it forward first and sort of making that the crux of the decision. You are painting the picture of a gap that's left in the market because of how things have developed. And then you propose your project as the solution to fill that gap. And then you can back it up with data and specifics of metrics and financial analysis for your deal. So even though I've kind of changed this deck because of this unique pitch that we're making, you can see that same principle being applied even within these individual sections. So what I do here is what I'm explaining. Okay, if you look at hospitality, the market overall, Airbnb's rise to prominence cannot be ignored. It's now overtaken Marriott and Hilton in bookings per year. And what's happened with that is it's just brought vacation rentals, which have always been around, to the mass market, mass proliferation. It exposed really all travelers to some of the unique parts of Airbnbs, such as self-check-in, no service, really unique properties, one-off properties out on the bounds of nature. There's been a bunch of new things introduced through Airbnb. It's really developed and risen and overtaken hotels. And then what I've seen happen and where this concept has come from is after COVID, when it really spiked, you got a ton of saturation of supply to meet that demand. And with that, you got a lot of people becoming hosts that never really should have gotten into hospitality in the first place. And frankly, the quality and consistency of Airbnb has fallen off a cliff. A lot of people are moving back away from Airbnb to hotels, but they don't want to give up on everything that Airbnb's introduced and offered them. So if you look at the two sides of the market, then you have traditional hotels, which people are sort of moving back towards for the consistent experience, higher end design often, the service, and then some level of brand loyalty or branding that they can attach to, brands that they can believe in and rely on and trust. You don't get that with individual hosts. But they don't want to give up on the things like the privacy and space, the room for groups, autonomy of vacation rentals, and then often a better value. And that's where this idea for branded rentals has come from. So I lay that out here across a couple of different slides. And then I say, here's an example. This isn't just me talking about it. Here's a branded rental. They're having success. They're achieving great rates in a market in Mexico where this is a really great rate on a small property, and they've achieved critical success as well. That just backs up everything I'm saying. And then one unique thing that I've done here, I thought about this a lot. Rather than putting myself and my partner, the team, just down in the team section, which usually comes at the end, I included it here in the concept section because what I'm saying is, hey, if all that is true, if you believe in what I just said, if you've experienced that with Airbnb and hotels, if you're seeing that example, that example is proving that, success and opportunity, it's there. We are the team to do it. Here's why. Because this is what we do. We focus on developing novel concepts. Here's Lauren's concept. This is why it's unique. Here's my concept. This is why it's unique. So I wanted to back up, like I said, the two strengths of this deal, the property and location, and then the team, primarily Lauren, because her concept is so similar to what we're doing. But my concept in Hotel Pearl as well has leveraged the similar progression of Airbnb and these new unmet demands that came out of this progression in this story. So both those past properties back up why we are the team to execute on this opportunity. Now this section, it's very long, but we can move through it pretty quickly because I don't think I've ever included a section like this in a deck. I called it Property Program. I went deep into detail with a lot of visuals on just what's on this property, what does it include, what do each of the buildings have, and then laying out on individual slides views of the building as well as the different interiors, and sort of calling out, here's a rendering on the left, here's exactly where it is in the building on the right. And this has been because when I've pitched this in the past, again, because it's such a unique concept, people are like, how does this work? Vacation rentals, they're clustered together, just that. There's been a ton of questions like, what's on floor 1? What's on floor 2? Where are the rooms, etc. That's why I spent so much time on, I don't know, maybe 15 slides showing off the renderings. Again, the other reason for this, I could have grouped all these renderings together in just a couple of slides, sort of like in a grid. The design is so important and, in my opinion, so good on this project. I wanted to give it the space, each rendering in each space, the slide, the focus, to see that visual, to see where it is on the property, and really get an understanding of what this place is and what it feels like. So this is the layout. I'll just give you a little bit of information on the concept. Basically, we have 2 properties, 2 lots. On each lot, there's a primary house and a guest house. The guest houses have 2 suites. Every room or suite has an en-suite bathroom and sort of a little lounge area or patio. Guest houses have 2. The lot 1 main house just has 4 suites on the top floor, and then the lot 2 main house has 8 on the first and second floor. And then the main houses have shared communal amenity spaces, big living room, dining room, kitchen, spa, bathhouse, pool, sauna, yoga studio. And what's great about this concept is it can be booked in any number of ways. You can book an individual room. You can book just a building, whether that's a guest house or a primary home. You can book a whole lot, so you can take down the whole lot 2 primary and guest house, while still there are other groups in the lot 1 configuration. Or you can book the entire property for larger groups. There's a total of 16 suites here. I go into each lot, into each building on each lot. So I'm kind of showing the views of the exteriors and then the interiors across both the primary house. I actually don't have interiors of the guest house, but I do show, I show the exteriors of each of the guest houses. That's the property program section. And then we wrap up with financials and team. So here, this is a pretty standard slide, just a short paragraph saying this is, again, what we're offering and what you get, what you can expect to get returned. Here are the key assumptions, operating assumptions, refinance, our margin, etc., that back up then the next slide, which is the financial model. It's not the full model. If somebody wants to dig deeper, they're going to have to ask and get the full model, which we will make available to them if they're, a potential investor. But it just gives the overview that someone would need to see at a base level. And then I have a lot of comps here with data that we've scraped or pulled from different sources. I've made sure to include both hotel and short-term rental comps. And then I have a specific comp detail slide focusing on Willow House because the concept is so directly similar to what we're doing with Oxido. And then we end with what is a much shorter team section because we went so much into detail on myself and Lauren earlier, and just a call to action saying, hey, email us if you're interested. So that is the pitch deck. I'm about done. It's probably taken me a week of focused effort, 4 or 5 hours a day. I'm going to do probably one more pass later today and then get this out to the potential guarantors. I appreciate you watching. Hope you got some value from this. If you have questions, if you're building out your materials and doing a capital raise, I'd say subscribe to the newsletter, which is down below in the description. Follow me on Instagram, buckshot.io. Subscribe to me here. And then you're welcome to email me as well, buck@humancap.com. Happy to talk to you. If you have any questions, respond as best as I can. I appreciate you following along and look out for more videos in the future. Thank you.